And we're back for another season of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Inside Sports Fantasy Football, along with my good friend, Mr. Chris Lardieri. He is here as well. Please make sure you like and subscribe, 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure you go ahead and catch all of my other shows, including the Pop Culture Cosmos, where it's on right now on all its venues. Also, as well, the Lakers Fast Break, where it's on all the venues. All these great places, please go ahead, like, and subscribe. But we are starting a new YouTube channel, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, which will be up in about, I think, maybe this time tomorrow as we're recording. I'll upload this first episode there, and then we'll go from there. Live shows across the platform. Cannot thank you enough for supporting us, but truly appreciate you doing so. And again, please go ahead and give a shout out to anyone that you can about Inside Sports Fantasy Football for anyone who is interested in fantasy football as well. But also, if you have any questions, isfantasyfootball at yahoo.com, Inside Sports FF on Twitter, and Inside Sports FF at gmail.com. You can go ahead and send our question, and I'll either send out to Chris, send out to Joe, send out to Sean, any one of our guys. In fact, I've got a couple others that may be able to stop by during the course of the season as well. So go ahead and check it out each and every week right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football. But after all these years, of course, one of the great men behind Inside Sports in and of itself, I latched on to Inside Sports years ago, but I'm not the originator of that. But one of the men who is here today. It is my cohort in crime when we go to the field, get there, into the huddle, and get ready to play some football. It is Chris Lardieri. Chris, glad to have you here. I see you set out the messages for fantasy football already for the league that we're in. I noticed some inflation.
Yeah.
I'll say that as far as, yeah, like everything else gets more expensive. This got a little bit more expensive too. I noticed that. So I just said, I see what you're up to.
A whopping $5. I figured, maybe a little more skin in the game. People take it more seriously. Besides you and I, not mentioning any names, but Dom and I were thinking about it. I'm like, why don't we just raise it a little bit? One of my other leagues did. So much like the economy, if my competitor raises prices, so can I, right?
Absolutely. NE is already out there on the chat. Truly appreciate you joining us. He says, stay away from the Bengals O-line. It's horrendous. Paid all that money for skilled players just to get Burrow killed. That does not bode well for one of the highest ranked quarterbacks that out there. I would also, whether Joe has not been on the fence at all, he's really not been a big supporter of Caleb Williams. But if you are, I would even advise hedging my bets on that, because when they're playing, hey, let's get a left tackle off the street to find a left tackle to go ahead and play in the game, that gets kind of concerning for me as well. So just a little bit of tidbits there. We're going to go ahead and give you, of course, the next hour. And, of course, truly appreciate you throwing in your questions as well, because the fantasy football drafts, they are going right now. They are flowing. They are going wild. They're running wild. Fantasy football is, Chris, you can truly say now, is a billion-dollar venture from what we were doing way back when. In fact, I was at Barnes & Noble's earlier today, and they still had the fantasy football magazines, things of that nature. But it's just a small bit of the newsstand at Barnes & Noble. I remember back in the day in the 90s when it was these huge Street and Smiths and other, these other outlets that were covering it, and they had these huge Bibles for each and every year that they would go ahead and put out there, and there'd be sections devoted to fantasy football. It's all changed, my friend, but yet, in many ways, it stays the same.
Indeed, it does. There are even more experts, shows, podcasts, you name it. I logged into Yahoo today for our said league, and they had a little blurb at the front saying it's the 28th year of fantasy football, which scared me even more because I've been using Yahoo from one form or another for my fantasy leagues for 28 years. So that's especially sobering. But yeah, the $1 billion industry thing is quite amazing, and I think too even more fascinating is how it's managed to toe the line between gambling and entertainment after all these years.
One thing I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you've noticed, there's these new, they're trying to tweak fantasy football to bring in more people, obviously, to bring in more younger players in there, plus also as well try to get people to diversify their fantasy football. There's some new things, new twists added to the old fantasy football. There's higher stakes involved. There's games that both ESPN and Yahoo are promoting that are outside of the traditional norm of what we know as fantasy football leagues. If you could go into it a little bit, if you've been bombarded with the advertising for it, because I have, because again, it's about the ever-changing face of fantasy football from what it once was to what it is now.
Yeah, I see the emails. I get the push notifications. I disregard them. I'm more of a traditionalist. I do like tweaking with the rules. There are some leagues that don't have a tight end or a kicker or defense, and PPR goes back and forth. I've seen 1 point and half point, but for the most part, I still play the pure game, as it were, with the standard rules. I've never gotten into an auction draft. I know that's become popular, but yeah, if I have more time, maybe I'd do that. But I'd rather play in two standard leagues, honestly. But yeah, it's like anything else. It's gimmicks, and you've got all these little quirks in the rules. When to take my car to get an oil change, and the guy I usually deals with is telling me about one of the leagues he's in that's got all these crazy rules, and I just zone out at a point, and I'm like, I don't think I can handle it. I don't know if it's my age or that I'm more of a traditionalist, but I'm old school and unabashedly so.
It's almost like wrestling at points, because the one of the latest gimmicks that have happened now is gauntlet style fantasy football, where you're pitted against others in like round robin tournaments almost, and it's short bursts but potentially high rewards. So, for instance, like the Gridiron Gauntlet on ESPN, as they called it and have trademarked it, but similar style, gauntlets are popping up all over the place. Yahoo, I believe, is doing something similar in that vein as well. So, yeah, it's weird, but it's not unexpected, because they don't want the traditional fantasy football to pop up. They want something else, because it's obviously they're not catering to Gen X. They're catering to Gen Z at this point. They want to bring in new players, younger players. They want to be able to sustain them, because like you said, Chris, 28 years. It's actually, for me, going, I think, on 30, I want to say 30 years right now will be
Wow.
this year, I think, if that's the case. And I will tell you right now that it is evolving, it is changing. I do like the basics myself as far as traditional fantasy football, but I can understand these companies wanting to make it cooler and sexier for a younger audience.
Yeah, it's like everything else. It's marketing, it's repackaging. As we've seen with the NBA, they've got to have this in-season tournament to try and get a younger audience. They've got to have a streaming platform, a social media presence, and the ironic thing, you talk about Gen Z. Tom and his friends are having a draft coming up next week, and I was lucky enough to chaperone it, for lack of a better term. Just hung out there and watched some college football games while they drafted, and made sure no one mess with them with the bill. But their league was basically the same rules that the ones that you and I play in. Their draft was the same. There's a lot of similar smack talk, going back to the days when we used to do in-person drafts. So gives me some hope. But yeah, I get it. Gimmick is the perfect word, and I've heard about these gauntlet ones, and that's another one that gives me a headache. I'm just like, give me my standard fantasy football, and we'll take it from there.
Absolutely. We're not trying to be curmudgeons on this show. We're just trying to tell you that, the harder and more complicated you make it, uh, just the less relaxing and more intense it gets. Now, some people like that, but for me, I just want to be able to go into it and have fun. And it's sometimes it's just hard to see where it's going, that I'm going to continue to have fun doing it. But for now I am. So that discussion is going to be saved for a different day. But right now it is fantasy football. People are in their fantasy football drafts going and upcoming here over the next few days and weeks before the season starts. I did want to ask you your thoughts on it. Obviously, Chris Lardieri providing over the years probably some of the best insight out there. Now, he'll humbly tell you not and try to give you 10 reasons why not to. But in that detailed answer he gives you, it just tells you why his insight is so good. So be that as it may, I want to bring you back on, my friend. Always glad to have you here. You've graciously allowed me to utilize the Inside Sports IP, you and Charles. Big shout out to Charles Smith, legendary voice from the past on this. Maybe one day he'll stop by again. We'll have to wait and see. But Chris, I want to ask your thoughts. These drafts are starting now. Before we get into sleepers and late rounds and all that good stuff, let's start with the basics. Your thoughts and perceptions going after 2 weeks or halfway through in many cases of preseason football.
So thank you for the kind words, Gerald. They're always appreciated, and I'm in constant communication with Charles on Instagram via the memes and reels we send back and forth to each other. So I'll pass your sentiments along and see if I could twist his arm onto the show this season. But here's what I think of preseason football, and as a long time diehard New York Giants fan, and this doesn't necessarily apply to fantasy because he's not going to start the season, but everyone is just overjoyed with the 2 games Jackson Dart has played, and more power to him. He looks good out there. He looks like he's digested the playbook, and I say to Dom, that's great. He looks like he knows what he's doing. He's playing against a bunch of second and third stringers. So when I see him in a game and he doesn't get his head taken off, or he looks like he knows what he's doing and there's some hope for the future, I'll feel good about that. So to hear, Joe Burrow is playing tonight, Caleb Williams played last night, I think it's good they get some reps, but in reality, they're playing with backup offensive lines, throwing against backup defenses. So is there a ton to get out of it? Yeah, they didn't get hurt, and it looks like their mechanics are still there, but not a lot can be told in 2025 NFL preseason football. Now you've got someone like Travion Henderson with the Patriots, who I was kind of hoping would be in one of my rookie sleepers this year, and the media is all over what he's doing in these controlled scrimmages and his 2 preseason games. So on the flip side, it's hard to not be encouraged by that, but when the season comes, who knows how Josh McDaniel is going to utilize him right away? It's hard to say. So I think it's good for kind of having a long-term eye on the season and think, maybe I can get this guy. If he falls in a round, I stash him. I put him on my bench, but I don't feel like there's a heck of a lot to take out of it other than, are guys getting hurt, or maybe there's some depth chart battles that are developing. But I feel like after week 3, everyone goes radio silence in the NFL, and we've just got to wait for the season to start to see what the storylines will be.
Once again, it is Chris Lardieri and Gerald Glassford, Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Truly appreciate it. If you want to pop your questions on Inside Sports Fantasy Football right here, or put them in the chat, put them down below. Your choice if you're watching this after the fact. If you try to put a message out there on YouTube, or go ahead and send it to us, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com. Of course, Inside Sports FF on Twitter and Gmail as well. Want to go ahead and talk about drafting because it is coming close to our draft. I always just seem to join a free league just because to keep my rhythm in there as well. I want to ask you your thoughts. Jamar Chase seems to be at the top of the list for everybody out there. It's kind of disappointed and kind of surprised. Shedeur Sanders, is he being picked number 1 at anybody else? Yeah. All kidding aside, though, he is someone that people are keeping an eye on. Of course, Joe Flacco was named quarterback for the Cleveland Browns for now. I think Shedeur Sanders, in his one performance already, showed some things that need to note for the future. So him being a 5th round draft pick may have been a serious faux pas by a lot of other teams out there. But I will just say this. Right now, Jamar Chase, when you're talking about NE staying away from Bengals, Right now he's the number one choice. I've looked at 7 or 8 different lines already. He is the number one prospect out there, the number one draft pick for everyone on all these rankings and all these lists. Is he your number one as well?
I think he has to be, although I did hear one recently where they were talking about how they think Bijan Robinson's got a case to be the number one pick, and I wouldn't be totally opposed to that. But just given the volume and the fact that Dom and I watched this quarterback documentary on Netflix where they followed around Burrow as one of the 3 QBs they documented all season last year, and just the way that offense hums. T. Higgins is back. Chase Brown coming off a great year. You could say what you want about that Bengals offensive line, but that defense, especially if Trey Hendrickson does get traded in this contract dispute, is going to be atrocious, and the Bengals are just going to be putting up points. So, from a logic perspective, Burrow played with Chase at LSU. They've clearly got chemistry, to say the least. So, I don't think you could go wrong. But if someone goes in one of our leagues and takes Bijan first, I would not be shocked or appalled because it's hard to find quality running back talent that high in the draft. There's just so many committees in the NFL now.
One of the things I did want to ask you as well when it comes to some of the other top players in fantasy football, you mentioned Bijan Robinson, who I think a lot of people are sneakily going to put at the top of their list. Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, CeeDee Lamb is kind of interesting, and Justin Jefferson always is. Justin Jefferson will have essentially a rookie quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, throwing to him. Yes, I understand he was drafted previously, but obviously he was injured and couldn't do so. So that is kind of a concern for people out there. What are your thoughts on some of these top players that are thought of in that group mix? In fact, I'll just throw one out here, Fantasy Pros. They're using in their tier, like I said, Chase Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs from Detroit, Saquon Barkley for Philadelphia. That seems to be a no-brainer right there for me. CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, are you worried about his health at all going into this season, especially playing on the somewhat, different team in the Dallas Cowboys, the way they run things and the way they just go about doing their business?
Yeah, I am, frankly. And let's not forget, too, they got rid of head coach Mike McCarthy and brought in unproven Brian Schottenheimer. So that's another factor. Dak Prescott's been hurt a lot, had a season ending injury last year. Will he come back to full form? So I think there are a lot of question marks there. And those are sorts of things you got to consider with a wide receiver, much like you would with running back with their offensive line. So while I get why Lamb's ranked that high, I'd be a little cautious given the Prescott and Schottenheimer factor. With Jefferson, I know last year he had Sam Darnold. I think he was the consensus number 1 or 2 going into last year's drafts, up there with Christian McCaffrey. So yeah, McCarthy's a rookie quarterback, but I've got a lot of faith in the Vikings and their coaching staff and their line. And case in point, they plugged in Sam Darnold last year. Everyone thought O'Connell was crazy to make him the starter, and he had a tremendous year. So I think I'm not saying McCarthy's a guy you've got to take and make your fantasy starting quarterback, but from what I read, all indications are is that Justin Jefferson's going to get the ball this year.
That's one thing I did want to point out. I wanted him to make him his own section. For the past few years, Christian McCaffrey, until he's had his issues, was the definitive number 1 player in many people's eyes in fantasy football. He's won, back when he was healthy and playing full seasons, he was winning people leagues, and it wasn't even close in some occasions. So we turn to what we've seen since, and the shine has kind of been rubbed off when it comes to Christian McCaffrey because of his injury status. Obviously, last year, the horrible year for San Francisco, a team that many people thought was actually going to do a lot of good things last year and unfortunately didn't, because a lot of it based off of injuries. Your thoughts on Christian McCaffrey? I mean, I'm not going to say it's, buy low, because, my God, we're still talking about someone that could be a first rounder in many drafts, a high second rounder. I don't think he gets out of the middle of the second round for in almost any draft that's out there. Your thoughts on where Christian McCaffrey stands? Is he still an elite fantasy football player that you need to look at in your top 10 picks?
I think he's an elite fantasy football player. My problem is I don't know with his health. It's just been a continuing saga with him. I mean, he looked good last year when he was starting and healthy, but are you going to get 16, 17 games out of him? Probably not. But that said, I think the risk return is there. If you've got the intestinal fortitude to take a flyer on him late first round, early second round, you're going to get a guy who is the man in San Francisco, a team that signed Brock Purdy to an extension. I know they lost Debo Samuel, but they've got weapons. They've got George Kittle. They've got a fourth place schedule, and I trust Kyle Shanahan and his offensive scheme. So if there's a run on running backs, I think I'd rather have a Christian McCaffrey over a Brees Hall, for instance, if you've got the patience to wait around for him. But that said, you better draft another quality running back behind him, because if he does go down, there goes a lot of points. And then the other thing too is you never know who the backup's going to be in San Francisco. Whenever McCaffrey gets hurt, it feels like this is a revolving door committee that Shanahan likes to institute. So I couldn't tell you who to take as his handcuff.
Once again, it is Chris Lardieri along with me, Gerald Glassford. It's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Michael says, let's go Rams. There you go. There's going to be a lot of Rams out there as far as people are interested in when it comes to fantasy football, indeed, including Puka Nacua, who seemingly is healthy, and he is being thought of as a very interesting pick in the first round if you can go ahead and get him. But I want to ask you this. Puka Nacua is a wide receiver. A lot of what we talked about already is running back based. Talk to me about what your observations are about where the league is going. Is it trending back towards running back? Is it a divisive split between teams devoted to the run or the pass? Tell me where you think we're at, because it is very important, if that's the case, on who you select in your first 2, 3, 4 picks in your fantasy draft.
I think it's still a passing league, but the pendulum, thanks to Saquon Barkley last year, is tilting back towards the running back side. And you're seeing teams like, for instance, Dom and I had Jameer Gibbs last year in one of our leagues, led us to the playoffs. So you get a guy like that, you're going to get a ton of points, a plug and play guy you don't have to worry about. I know David Montgomery's injury also helped him at times, but regardless, you can find yourself a guy who is the man and is going to get all the carries. I think you draft him. So you definitely need a running back in fantasy football. You look at the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh, even though he's got Justin Herbert, he's going to want to run the ball and control the line of scrimmage. So you gotta kind of take it on a case by case basis and hope there's not these three-headed committees like Sean Payton seems to like to do in Denver, and try and find the proverbial man and draft him, because you can pick all the receivers you want. You could take a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson really early in your draft, but you've got to have running backs if you're going to win fantasy football. At the end of the day, the team with the most points wins each week, and you can't get it all from just one or two positions. You need to be well diversified.
We have a question in the chat. JY, great to have you here, my friend. As always, a great part of what we do at the Lakers Fast Break. He said, besides Thomas for the Jacksonville Jaguars, are there any other impact players, meaning players that you think could start or be a key member of your team as far as alternates, things of that nature, players that you think you can utilize from the Jags? Or do you still think they are as inept as always there in Jacksonville?
I'm a big BTJ fan. Had him last year. Another example of a rookie that Dom and I stashed, and before you know it, he's putting up numbers left and right as an everyday starter. It's tough, especially with that running back situation. I know some people are high on Tank Bigsby, but who knows who's going to be the starter there, if that's going to be a rotation. But I mean, you cannot deny Travis Hunter. I mean, the Jags traded next year's first round pick to get this guy. It looks like he's going to be a two-way player, but I think they're going to utilize him as a receiver. And if Trevor Lawrence can't get points or put points on the board, throwing to those two guys in Jacksonville, I don't know who can. So I think Hunter's worth a look. Now, I wouldn't take him super early, but he could be one of these guys once he gets going, and with Thomas on the other side of the field from him at the line of scrimmage, that's only going to help him. You can't just key on one guy in Jacksonville now through the air.
I think if for him, like you said, he would be someone maybe because I'm worried about, like you said, because of the fact if he is a two-way player and if they do stick to it for any length of time, he'd probably limit his number of reps that are out there during the course of the game on the offensive side. And if that's the case, I would probably lean, if you're in a league based on yards per catch, or some, just some type of barometer that can utilize his skills, which will be, again, I think, not out there. He will not be out there predominant number stamps, the snaps, as long as they continue to go ahead and utilize him as a two-way player. But Travis Hunter, I think, intrigues me, and he could be the most dynamic player coming into the NFL this season.
Absolutely. I mean, selfishly, I'm hoping they just keep him on the offensive side of the ball and this experiment doesn't last long, but his talent's undeniable.
I want to ask you this, Chris, and I can't avoid it much longer because, again, we talked about where the league is going. To me, it seems like there are teams still devoted heavily to the pass, and now there's other teams kind of leaning towards the run and implementing that at least a lot more efficiently in the offense. You talk about the rookies. We already talked about Travis Hunter, but the biggest impact rookie and a guy that has already a lot of pressure who says he has arrived already after a preseason game, which I don't think I would have said. But it is, of course, as everybody knows out there, from the Raiders, Magic Man's team, a guy a team who hopefully I'll see another 3 games this year, Ashton Jeanty. So your thoughts on Ashton? Again, he is being thought of very highly for a rookie. And I mean really highly. So that means he's going to be a workhorse for the Raiders. Again, we're talking rookie here. So I don't know. Him being high up guy that's being thought of in many aspects as a top 20 pick in fantasy football. Is that a little bit too much too soon for Ashton Jeanty?
I think it could be if you take him in the first round. He's a great prospect. He was outstanding at Boise State. What worries me is the 17-game season, his size, and the pounding he's going to take in the NFL as the man in the Vegas backfield. I know they got Geno Smith, they got Pete Carroll now. They've really cleaned house there and turned things over. But we saw Geno's struggles last year with the Seahawks. Is he an improvement at quarterback for the Raiders? Yes. Is he the long-term answer? No. So we'll see. And the thing is, too, the Raiders play in the AFC West, which has three playoff teams, 3 teams with strong defenses, and those are 6 games
and
right
the
there
Raiders
are going to be tough.
Okay. There's 3 teams, really good teams, and then there's the Raiders. Yes, I hear you. But,
exactly.
Sean actually has some hope. Sean has actually some hope. I've talked to him about this on the Lakers Fast Break that they could do some things, maybe get a break-even record. I don't think he has like championship hopes or Super Bowl hopes for them, but just looking like something that they can go ahead and maybe make their way as a 500 team. But yeah, just any other rookies right now that are yet you think people might need to take a chance on? I shy away from rookies. I'm not going to be dishonest with you. I kind of shy away from rookies unless it's the later rounds, unless I see somebody with some intriguing type of skills. I'm just worried, again, when you come into a league like this, which is so vastly different, in my opinion, than college football. NFL is you go from a boys' game to a man's game, in my opinion, when you upgrade to college NFL. Again, I understand these college games. You get some of these great teams. They're really tough. They're really great. They're almost like NFL linemen. They're almost like NFL players. For the most part, they're almost putting out like NFL teams. But when you graduate and you get drafted or even undrafted, when you make the NFL, to me, it's a different league altogether. The physicality is so much more expounded upon. there's so much more potential for injury, in my opinion. Your thoughts on any rookies that might be able to break out of the pack and surprise and get people some good numbers this fantasy football season?
Yeah, so it looks like the rest of the world has caught on to my initial thought. And as I mentioned, Travion Henderson with the
Mhm.
Patriots, I agree it's hard for rookies to make their mark. The Jaden Daniels and BTJs and Malik Neighbors of the world are kind of outliers to be that great that soon, but there is the potential for that. You've got Hampton with the Chargers. You know, Najee Harris never learned what we did as teenagers: don't play with fireworks, and messed up his eyes. So Hampton's going to be the guy in an offense, like I mentioned earlier, is going to be more run focused this year. On the quarterback side, I'm not advocating taking him, but if you want to take a flyer on the guy late and stash him just because he's going to play on a not great team and they believe in him as the number one pick, Cam Ward with the Titans. I'm not saying he's a fantasy starter, but you want to take a gamble and stash him and think, he's going to be on a bad team. Um, Not saying he'll be Jaden Daniels, but expectations are low. He's got some receivers there. Maybe in the second half of the year, he figures it out. And it's a guy, if you got an injury or maybe a bye week plug-in you need, maybe it's worth taking a shot on Cam Ward. We shall see. That the talent's there. It's just the decision making I worry about. And then a lot of people are talking about Tet McMillan, the Arizona wide receiver that the Carolina Panthers took. I watched this guy play in college. He's a phenomenal talent. The knock on him is he focused and interested enough? I don't know, but the Panthers in year two with Canales as head coach, Bryce Young kind of resuscitated off the scrap heap, as it were. Kind of played pretty well down the stretch last year. There were some glimmers of hope. If they are going to throw the ball, I think he'll be a focus. So that's another guy. Maybe you take him, you hold on to him like people did with BTJ last year. I'm not saying he'll be that, but don't expect dividends immediately. Have some patience. And that's the key with the fantasy draft. Once you get past those first few rounds and you've got your core group of talent, got to start taking flyers of guys that, sit on the bench for a few weeks, but you think long term might pan out.
Especially if you're in dynasty leagues. If you're in dynasty
Oh, yeah.
leagues, then you definitely have to start thinking about younger players being able to transition into those players and be able to get them on the cheap or on the low and be able to go ahead and utilize them going forward. So I get that. I understand that. But for regular PPL leagues, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how many people just put all their weight behind Genti for the Raiders, Hunter, just might even see some Shadur Sanders picks out there. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays itself out with the rookies there. Again, I think this is a better rookie crop than most years. So I do see a lot of these rookies getting some time under the sun. And that doesn't mean you can't pick them up during the course of the season, because some of the best pickups and additions that you make during the course of the season might be rookies that are still on the waiver wire, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the all-time classics, Puka Nakua, after a big Week 1 game for the Rams, was out there on waivers, and I know we rode him that particular year to the playoffs. So there will be someone, mark my words.
Absolutely, indeed. All right, let's get to the skill positions. As far as quarterback is concerned, we'll start off with that. Quarterbacks is so funny because some people, I'll say me, go and think of quarterbacks as a little bit more priority, as somebody that as has won leagues before with really good quarterback play. It might be the difference that you need. Sometimes you can have you can have average performances from the rest of your team, but if your quarterback blows up, it can make all the difference in a one-on-one matchup. Over the course of a season, obviously it's great. You need a full fleshed out team, but in those one-on-one matchups, especially in the playoffs, it could be crucial if you have a quarterback that can really get you an outstanding game. Josh Allen, for instance, along his way to obviously stardom and play MVPs and all that, he has carried me on more than one occasion, and I do have a tendency to look at him strongly in the first 2 or 3 rounds. I've won leagues with him. I cannot tell you wrong, but where is your priority with quarterbacks as far as where you put them in the draft? And where do you think we should go with as far as the top quarterbacks outside, of course, say Josh Allen right now? What quarterbacks do you think are worth high draft choices at this point in time?
So quarterbacks are important. Now, I will say, I've seen in way too many leagues where people will take one at the middle of the first round. I personally wouldn't do that. I know a lot of people love the Josh Allens, like you mentioned, and the Lamar Jacksons, and in the past, Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, for instance. I'm not going to reach on a quarterback. That said, when that first wave goes, and I think you lump Jaden Daniels in that top tier too now, because he's a multiple threat and can run and run for touchdowns. Um, I don't think you wait too long, but I think you've got to get yourself a serviceable one. And case in point, last year, uh, we ended up picking Jared Goff as a backup. He had a phenomenal year. Now that's a fluke. Goff sitting out there, and I got him in, somewhere after the 10th round. I can't remember where. But if you're not going to get one of these running quarterbacks that puts up,
Mm-hmm. That puts up a lot of numbers, that puts up a lot of touchdowns, puts up a lot of as far as running plays, running yards. To me, that's obviously something that I talk to and think of when I see Josh Allen. I get it, Chris. I get it. When it comes right down to it, yes, you do need to look at that factor because having a mobile quarterback who's also very skilled when it comes to watching what we see out there in fantasy football. Yes, definitely having some really big thoughts on that because I really think that for me, getting a guy that can be able to produce at a high level and can get you running touchdowns as well, along with obviously what they could do from the passing standpoint, for me is it's really that added bonus and be able to go ahead and outcome the game. For me, it changes a lot of times the outcomes of a game when I have teams that don't perform as well, but I have a guy like Josh Allen or a multifaceted quarterback that can go ahead and get you a running touchdown, which, as you know, Chris, is really something special in PPL leagues.
absolutely. I don't want to call it cheap points. It's more like icing on the cake. But yeah, it's when a throwing touchdown's 4 and a running touchdown or receiving touchdown 6, by all means, if you can get those extra points, great. But don't forsake the rest of the depth on your team. If there's a run on running backs or wide receivers, you got to take that into account and see what else is left on the board and start plotting ahead. All right, I'm here. I got to wait 4 picks till my next pick, or I got to wait 8 picks till my next pick, and just kind of map it out and say, all right, the top tier quarterbacks probably aren't going to be there. I better grab one now and then build my running backs and receivers accordingly in the upcoming rounds.
So, with that, who are your top 5 quarterbacks right now heading into the drafts that are going to be taking place and heading into this upcoming NFL season?
I mean, Allen's the no-brainer number one for me. I think Lamar Jackson's right behind him. Um, I think too, you've got to. I had him last year. Coming to grips with the fact that I probably won't have him this coming year. I think Daniels has to be up there off the rookie year he had. And then, people go back and forth. I know the clickbait world likes to talk about whether Jalen Hurts is elite, but I don't know if he's 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever he is, but I've had him in the past and he's always going to get those touchdowns off the tush push. And I think you've got to have him somewhere up there. And then two, with the rest of more of the traditional pocket quarterbacks, like Joe Burrow a lot. I really don't know if Patrick Mahomes is worthy of being in that upper echelon anymore. I know he had an off year last year. Whether Rasheed Rice is going to be suspended, what kind of receivers he's going to have. Let's face it, Travis Kelsey's slowing down, if not slowed down completely. So I don't think Mahomes is the same player that we all know and love from previous fantasy years, and he's kind of been trending downward on the buy low side. And I don't know where I'd rank him number wise, but CJ Stroud had a rough year last year. He was banged up. His offensive line was atrocious. The Texans feel like they've addressed that. You look at what he did last year, even in the playoffs against Kansas City with like depleted receiving core. I just still believe in the guy, and I think he's due for a bounce back year.
Okay, absolutely. And then anybody else thinking as far as quarterback is concerned, or I know we're going to get into sleepers here and deep deep picks that you might think that might be of interest to everybody out there. But any other top quarterbacks stand out to you from a multifaceted standpoint?
You know, we talked about Brock Purdy earlier. I don't think he's elite, but he does get some running yards and some running touchdowns. And I just personally feel that team's going to bounce back this year. So that might be someone, maybe a little more on the sleeper or buy low side, or he's got some deflated value. He might be someone you want to consider as a quarterback if you're willing to wait around for one.
One of the things I did want to ask you, okay, we did go ahead and cover some of the running backs out there to talk about, in your mind, some of the top running backs already. As far as we talked about Bijan, we talked about, of course, Ashton Genty. Are these some of the guys that you think you might be interested in getting? Are these some of the guys that are still top five in the league? If not, put out your top five as far as your running backs are concerned.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, you've got to go Bijan one, a combination of Saquon or Jameer Gibbs. I mean, I really don't care what the order. Look, Saquon's not going to have the year he had last year. My only hope is he doesn't get hurt. But the guy's, if he plays, he's putting up numbers behind that line, and with all the weapons the Eagles have, Genty in some spots you see ranked as high as 5 or 6 might be worth a flyer. I mean, me personally, I don't know if I've got the risk tolerance for that, but I understand why people would take him. He's got a ton of talent, and he's going to be the guy in Vegas. I really like Kyron Williams with the Rams. I know there's always this talk that Blake Corum's going to push him, but I'm guy just was signed to a nice contract extension. And I feel Sean McVay believes in him. And as we mentioned earlier, as you get down the list, willing to take a flyer on Christian McCaffrey, just be prepared to either draft his backup or draft heavily at running back. So you've got a deep bench. So those are some of the names I like there, for instance. They're, I know, like, even in Miami, some people are talking about Devon A. Chain. He kind of had a down year, and they think he's due to bounce back. I believe in him, but what worries me is if Tua does get hurt again, gets another concussion. Do you know who his backup is?
No, they don't.
The former Jets great Zach Wilson. So that.
Oh no.
But on the flip side, if that's what happens, I think A Chain's going to get a lot of touches, both running and receiving, and that's the thing. Some of these guys might not get a ton of rushing yards, but those, if you're in a PPR league and you get guys that can catch the ball, those are some nice extra points you can get at the running back position.
Because Miami used to have that depth. I remember at the running back, they used to have not too long ago. They used to have some really nice depth, and so when Arcane got injured, there would be someone else that would step up. But obviously, with the salary cap and the way it's structured, you just cannot hold on to a specific position like the running back, wide receivers, quarterback, what have you. You're able to prioritize more, but running backs for a while have not been a priority in the league, and it's clear that now that it's starting to trend to do so for more running in the league. Running backs now are become a higher priority around the league as far as who they need to have carrying that ball for 2 or 3 carries.
Absolutely. And then that's the thing to consider too. Maybe these guys don't play every down, but if they're a third down back and they've got a chance to get some passes, I know Gibbs, for instance, got us some nice yards as a receiver last year. So make sure to look for that when you're considering your running backs.
We talked about Jamar Chase at wide receiver being almost the universal number one in almost every rankings that are out there. CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, all considered top 5 material as well. Who else do you think sneaks in there as far as a first round wide receiver option out there? Because again, wide receivers, yes, there is a tendency to start leaning towards running backs, but there are some teams still heavily reliant on passing as well.
Yeah, I think you'll see 2 names like Puka Nakua and Malik Neighbors from the Giants sneak in there just because they're the clear number one guys. And I know there's concern about Stafford and injuries again, but I feel like that's every year with Stafford. Puka's going to get the ball, and with Devontae Adams, who's another sleeper I like on the other side, I think it's going to be hard to just key on Nakua this season. Neighbors had a phenomenal season with a revolving door of crap quarterbacks last year. So even if Russell Wilson doesn't last the season, and it is the chosen one, Jackson Dart, that guy's going to find a way to score points. And then, later on, moving into the second round, for instance, or even the third, you got guys that are just reliable and put up points year after year, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins from the Texans, who I've had before. I think he's a favorite of CJ Stroud. And then, too, like we mentioned, BTJ down in Jacksonville, and another old standard, AJ Brown in Philadelphia is going to get the ball. I know he's getting older and he gets paid a lot of money, but the guy just always seems to hook up with Jalen Hurts for touchdowns. So until he shows me otherwise, I think he's worth being drafted.
Once again, it is Chris Lardieri, along with me, Gerald Glassford. It is the Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Again, if you have questions for us, put in the comments below, put it in the chat if you're watching live, or isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com, or Inside Sports FF on Twitter and Gmail as well. One of the things I did want to ask you, obviously, when you're going through, again, this is a fantasy football primer for you guys, because you guys are about ready to get into drafts if you haven't already. Obviously, we look as far as what makes the team initially is your first top 3 picks, but those middle rounds are key, are very important to a lot of people. You can find some really good sleepers from time to time. Obviously, managing the waiver wire is great. And some people, like you said yourself, with Puka Nacua, have picked up waiver wire hits that have absolutely done really good for you. But with that, a lot of people are still looking for fantasy football sleepers in rounds 4 through 10. Who do you have as some sleepers that people need to keep an eye on right there for you?
Yeah, so I just blew it and mentioned one of them, Devontae Adams, and you say, how is he a sleeper? Well, he really didn't have a good year, and coming off a disappointing year back in 23, I think he's going to get involved in the offense with the Rams pretty heavily. And if people aren't paying attention, they just go looking at one of their magazines, like you mentioned, from Barnes and Noble, and they see him down the rankings, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, he had a bad year. I really don't want anything to do with him. Another guy, at least from the receiver side of things, I mentioned Cam Ward earlier. I don't think the Titans are going to be very good, but his main target this year is going to be Calvin Ridley. I know he seemed to bounce around the league a lot, but he's going to be the guy in Tennessee, and there are worse wide receivers you can have. At the running back position, I'm curious to see. He had a good rookie year. Tyron Tracy with the Giants. I think he's going to be the man there for now. Hopefully their offensive line is improved. They're going to have to run the ball. I just don't believe in Russell Wilson throwing the deep ball, but you want to get into a deep sleeper later in rounds. This guy was phenomenal in college. We saw him in the college football playoff, Cam Scadaboo out of Arizona State. I think if you're willing to take a late round flyer on him and stash him, by all indications, he's looked good in camp. Maybe you hold on to him if Tracy isn't producing and the Giants want to give Scadaboo a shot. That's a real deep sleeper I'm giving you here as a Giants fan. And then two, a rookie sleeper at the tight end position. You're going to call me crazy on this, but why would you want anyone from the Colts? Is his name Warren from the rookie tight end with the Colts? He, kind of fell to the Colts. I think the Bears had a shot at taking him and passed on him.
Are you
I'm not
talking about
saying
Tyler Warren?
Tyler Warren. I'm sorry. Yeah. So he really coming out of college was highly regarded, and I think he kind of fell in the draft, which was a surprise to people. Is he going to be this year's Brock Bowers? I don't know, but I feel like he's going to get a lot of looks, regardless which atrocious quarterback the Colts trot out there to start week to week, Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. I think both of them are kings of the check down at times, and they're going to rely on their tight end. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're, looking for a tight end and there's not a lot out there. Don't forget about him in maybe the middle to mid-late rounds if you need a tight end and all the good ones are gone.
Johnny says, yes, he was asking for my favorite team, and I told him it was, as I've told you on the show before, it is or it was the Raiders back in LA, but they broke my heart when they left. Little did I
Yeah.
know that they would leave again. But he says, Johnny, Gerald, the Raiders are in Las Vegas now. I said, yeah, I know. I go to their games, but it's not the same, guys. Go to a Raiders game. If you come to Las Vegas and you go to a Raiders game, you will understand. It's just not the same. It's the whatever if you're an Oakland Mausoleum fan, you liked it as far as what it went on there, or if you're an LA Raiders fan like me, it's just not the same. It's just not the same. It's very homogenized. The road team, it's got usually almost the same amount of people there as Raiders fans, if not more. Like last year in Pittsburgh, it was actually against Pittsburgh, it was actually 70% Pittsburgh in Las Vegas, 30% Raiders fans for that one. So yeah, it's not the same, Johnny, that it was. But yeah, like you said, maybe Pete Carroll will go from there. We'll get this team going. But I know that Magic Man, Sean Grice, he is a Raiders fan and he is hoping for big things. And Joe Soro as a Pittsburgh fan, and you, Chris, as a New York Giants fan. I'm just an NFL fan. I love to see the action. I love to go back and forth and watch from game to game to game. That's going to be getting a lot harder to do because of where the NFL rights are going at. I mean, the NFL Red Zone is being bought out by ESPN. Can you explain a little bit more right now about what's going on with the rights for the NFL as we head into the season and where fans really need to start focusing on where they need to watch NFL football?
Yeah, it gave me a headache. I had to actually read this a few times to figure it
Well, you
out. So,
just try the NBA, my friend. Just try the
oh yeah,
NBA.
that's a whole that's a whole
Yeah, I had to
series of
explain that the other
podcasts.
night.
Never
People
mind a
going,
show.
huh?
Yeah. So it's ironic. Everything is all bundled together. They break it up and then it'll become bundled again someday. So ESPN bought the rights and some sort of deal to share a stake in the NFL, and they swap some things. And so essentially, ESPN controls the rights to red zones, I believe, starting after this season. But here's the catch: they get the broadcast rights to red zone, meaning where you watch it on your TV or whether you use YouTube TV or wherever you use the archaic cable companies, let's say.
Cable.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
the NFL still owns the right to the streaming where you purchase it through their app or watch it on NFL.com. How this makes sense to me, I don't know. Consequentially, the ESPN now has the rights to the trademark term red zone, so they think they're going to do a college football red zone or an NBA red zone. I don't know how red zone applies to a basketball game, but I guess for college football it could kind of transfer over there. But yeah, ESPN's going to have control of it. Who knows if Scott Hansen will still be doing it long term? Although I think I already signed a contract extension this year, but you got that. You've got, you can watch your local games on your CBS, Fox, NBC, ESPN for Monday Night Football, wherever you get that. But don't ask me where you can find it if you don't subscribe to cable or YouTube TV or Hulu TV or whatever it's called these days.
Don't forget Netflix. Don't forget
Oh,
Amazon.
yes, so Amazon still got the Thursday night games, and Netflix now is a series of games on Christmas that are going to pulverize the NBA, which once had the exclusive right to the only sports on Christmas Day and night, and so they're going to essentially kill them in the ratings again this year. And yeah, there's always all sorts of talk of where things are going to go to. But, for the time being, at least we know CBS, Fox, NBC, and ESPN will be showing football games, and Super Bowls. They'll rotate every 4 years.
So before we head on out, my friend, I wanted to go ahead and ask for some final advice. We'll be obviously coming here, try as many as during the course of the season. We'll be here every week. We'll try to hit you guys up with probably one more episode before the start of the season. But I'm using this as the primer. So you guys, if you want to get the best advice for your upcoming drafts, because of the fact that there are a lot of drafts are going to be taking place this week, this weekend, next week, want to make sure you guys get in something right now for that. So with that said, my friend, about 5 minutes left. I want to hear your thoughts on what your best advice. Let's say you get one of those Gen Zers. In fact, you have a Gen Zer as a son. Now he, as a sports expert, born and bred, he doesn't need any help. You, as you often said on this show, that he has advanced. The student has outlasted the master. He is
Absolutely.
now Darth Vader, and you are Ben Kenobi in that scenario. But be that as it may, my friend, let's just say you have somebody at your work, just wet behind the ears on fantasy football. Your thoughts on what advice you give to them, or to anyone out there that's listening to this, that watches this, that wants to get into it, kind of intimidated by it. What kind of advice do you give them for this upcoming season?
So I would tell them, and I had a similar conversation with a coworker recently. Ironically, I would tell them you need some form of rankings when you're doing your draft. Most, as we said, are online. I do miss the in-person ones. Couldn't find a league that had that this year, but I'm not telling you to abide by these rankings. I'm not telling you one company's rankings are better than the other, but you need it in terms of to see who's left on the board. I know if we do a Yahoo online draft, they have their own rankings. You need it as a guide to see who's around there and just kind of like a baseline of like, all right, Jackson Smith and Jigba's out there. He was ranked the 10th wide receiver, and here we are in the middle rounds, and he's still there. I think that's a good value pick. Or, you realize, geez, I don't have a lot of running back depth, and 20 have gone already. Who's left on the board? Use it as a reference. Do not use it as a Bible. Number two, I think a lot depends on where you pick. If your league can set the draft order as early as possible before your actual draft, that's great. What you can then do, and Dom, the Gen Zer, is fond of this, join a Yahoo or ESPN mock draft from whatever position and draft from there. You can learn a lot by doing and seeing how people think and where they'll go. That said, there's always going to be someone who reaches on someone in the first round is either going to make you laugh or, grateful that someone fell to you.
Shador Sanders, number one pick. There you go.
Oh, that's Mel Kiper's draft board, but I would tell you don't use his rankings even in fantasy. But from that point on, I'm not going to tell you you've got to go two wide receivers. You got to go two running backs. You have to get a quarterback by round two. I will say in the first four rounds, you better get one of at least three of those positions. If you're not getting a quarterback by round four, you better take an elite tight end. From that point on, you just start filling in the blanks. I like to old school take a piece of paper and kind of map out like I've got three running backs here and one wide receiver. I better start building some wide receiver depth. I personally do not take a kicker or defense until very late in the draft. These guys are going to turn over, guaranteed. I know there will be some elite defenses out there, and someone will go take them in the eighth round. Let them have them. They're not going to win a fantasy football championship off of a defense alone. So pick a decent defense, but realize given roster spots and bye weeks, you're going to release them at some point. Don't treat this like, hey, I drafted this guy and paid him second round money. I can't afford to get rid of him. That's not the goal in fantasy football. The goal is to win. And if there's someone better on the waiver wire, then sacrifice someone on your bench. And then, two, like I mentioned earlier, you've got to get a quality quarterback. I'm not going to tell you how or when or why, but if you wait till the 10th round to get a quarterback, you're not going to get a good one. You're going to have to take a flyer on one and get someone who's mediocre and make you pull your hair out all year. You don't want to be stuck with Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, for instance. So I will not tell you you've got to get a running one or that quarterbacks need to comprise 40% of your total points in a given season or a given week. I'm not going to crunch the numbers there. I will tell you, though, your quarterback's got to get you points. If depending on the scoring system, the league you play, for using ours as an example, Gerald, you got a quarterback that's giving you 18, 19, 20 points a week. That's really good. You got depth and studs at wide receiver and running back that are putting up a lot of points. That makes up the difference for the Josh Allens of the world who can potentially put up 30 or even 40 in a given week. So you've got to build yourself a team that scores the most points every week. And two, sometimes you're going to get there in those middle rounds, you're zoning out. Pick a guy because you like him. Maybe you saw him play last year. Maybe he's in a doghouse right now and he's not in the starting lineup, but he's just an injury or a couple fumbles away from starting at running back or a couple drops away from being the number three wide receiver. Um, and that's my, in a nutshell, what you've got to do. I think with fantasy football, you've got to use your eyes more than crunching numbers. You've got to kind of, it's good to read about what guys do and who's getting the reps in practice or what the depth chart's going to look like. But remember, this is August. Things change so much over an 18-week season. So just because a guy's not starting now doesn't mean he won't be by the middle to latter portions of the year.
Once again, it is Chris Lardieri along with me, Gerald Glassford. I want to thank everybody for watching this thing. Brian put in the chat, could we do a mock draft? I will do you one better, Brian. I mentioned in the chat. I'll see if the LFB guys, Joe's like kind of stubborn on this. He's like, well, I'm in this one league and the 3 leagues. And I'll see if all the guys related to ISFF will want to be a part of a fantasy football league. I'll find out within the next 24 hours, guys. And on the next Lakers Fast Break, I will go ahead and announce if that's going to be made available. I'll make a leak, and if that's the case, we'll go ahead and I'll announce it on the Lakers Fast Break that we run tomorrow. So we will see if that happens. I cannot guarantee it because, again, when you're dealing with Joe, depends on what side of the web he crawled out of. So we'll see what happens. But maybe Chris will join us. Maybe Sean. Maybe Legend. Some of the other guys as well. So I will put it out there. I will ask, but I will make sure we can do something. Hopefully that will happen. But at least I'll get you an answer, Brian. I'll get you guys some answers out there if you guys want to be doing a Lakers Fast Break fantasy football league. I know we've kind of lost touch on our Lakers Fast Break basketball leagues, but we'll see what we can do. The fantasy football league seems to stick a little bit more, but we'll even do the fantasy basketball leagues if you guys want to go ahead and do that as well. Last question for you, my friend, with Brian. Jacobs over Akane with the injury report?
I would still lean towards Jacobs. I think that's another guy that is the key number one in Green Bay. Yeah, I know you got to be concerned with injuries with any guy, but I don't see him losing his job, and I really don't worry about him with Jordan Love as his quarterback versus, like we mentioned earlier, with Tua. So I've had Jacobs in the past. If he's out there again, I would not hesitate to draft him depending on where I am.
That's another great question that was out there. If you guys have questions as well, I put it out there to Johnny on the Bucks because, again, I think that's all riding on Mayfield and to see where if he can actually find the magic once again. We'll have to wait and see. Will his wideouts 1 year older be able to go ahead and produce the kind of yards that we now are looking at for the Tampa Bay Bucks? But we'll see how that happens. But we will be back at least one more time before the start of the season. It is Chris Lardieri along with me, Gerald Glassford. And again, you can go ahead and get in touch with us. Put a comment below. isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com, Inside Sports FF on Twitter, or insidesportsff@gmail.com. And I want to make an announcement as well. We have started a YouTube channel specifically for Inside Sports Fantasy Football Podcast that's now available on YouTube. So go ahead, like and subscribe. I'll be uploading this to there. So I just started today. And we'll go ahead and that's where we're going to put the main bulk of our fantasy football stuff there. But so glad that everyone could join us. Truly appreciate you doing so. It is Chris Lardieri. Chris, cannot thank you enough for stopping by. Any last thoughts again before we head out there?
Gerald, it's great to be back. I think if I can still count correctly, this is the start of season 7, and I don't know where the time's gone. But again, thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad we're continuing to trek along.
Johnny, that's a good question on the Steelers quarterbacks. As much as I would like to tell you it, Chris would like to tell you it, I think we got to get it straight from the super fan of Mike Tomlin, not as Joe Soro is. I think, Johnny, I will get Joe to tell you what his thoughts are on the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh because, Aaron Rodgers. Okay, we'll see. But once again, it is, of course, Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Again, if you have questions, please drop them below. If you're watching this after the fact, truly appreciate it. Drop them below as well. isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter or insidesportsff@gmail.com. Chris, always fantastic to have you here. We will get together one more time before the start of the season as far as talking fantasy football. I'm looking forward to it as well. Looking forward to hopefully getting Sean, Joe, Legend, anyone else I can bring in here as far as fantasy football gurus to come on the show. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts out there as well from everyone right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.